Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Speaking Sessions podcast. I've got Jeremy Shreifels here. He is an interdisciplinary international producer, and I can't say that fast at all. Interdisciplinary international producer. Man, that is a mouthful right there. Songwriter, touring drummer, best-selling author of the book Road to 99. Need to check that out. It's on Amazon. Great book. Speaker and executive coach. Jeremy has been bringing music to broad audiences for more than 2 decades. His focus across all of these art forms is an emotional connection, bridging lyric, rhythm, and melody to best serve the vision of both his own creations and those of the artist he works with. While has an extensive background in music, music isn't the only thing he's passionate about. Jeremy is also an avid coffee lover and dedicated father and husband. He and his family live in the greater Minneapolis area, as well as he speaks, he coaches. He's an amazing person. Just love being around Jeremy. We always have great conversations. And I know you'll enjoy this conversation today. And we're going to get into it later, but we're also partnering on an event coming up in a few months. So you'll have to check it out. You have to learn more about it. But first question I like to ask Jeremy, and then we'll go back into your background, is how did you overcome the fear of public speaking?
Wow, that's a really great question. I think the part for me that was made it easy to overcome that fear is just being a drummer on stage for so many years. That way, because I was always on the back of the stage, and so I was always what I thought was in the background, even though my presence was always in the foreground. And so when I got to the point where I was speaking on the stage, where I was the guy in the front, the guy with the microphone, so to speak, I could just fall into that. Oh, I'm just on another stage as a drummer. I'm just using
Hmm.
my words instead of my hands and feet. And so that was kind of how if you want to call it overcome a fear, I still to this day, after thousands of performances and dozens of speaking opportunities, still get nervous or still have that little bit of a fear. But as a speaker, as you know, probably it gives you that little bit of an edge. It
Hmm.
keeps you on the edge of your content, your audience, and who you're speaking to kind of bring that to life better when you have that little bit of fear, a little bit of nervousness. But the overarching, like, can I even walk up those 3 steps to get to the front of the stage to hold the microphone without shaking? I think it has a lot to do with just literally thousands of hours behind my drums in front of thousands of people performing. And so my mind automatically goes into that space right
Hmm.
before I would walk onto a stage as a speaker.
So is it kind of like you're there to perform for the audience, or is it just, hey, this is another performance. I've done this before. I can do it again kind of thing?
That I think of it as I'm there. This is another performance. I'm not,
Okay.
I like that you made a distinction between, like, am I there to perform for the audience? Of course, I'm there to deliver me as the performance to the audience. However, I want them to know that it's authentic and it's me. And so
Hmm.
I am creating another performance.
I like that. And the fact that you get nervous, that's a good thing because we all should get nervous. The day you aren't nervous to get on stage is the day that you're too arrogant and you're not actually trying to deliver value and you're not worried that the audience is going to actually receive your message well. You just think that your message is so great that they're all just going to love it and they're going to be able to take away so much from it. So we have to, those nerves are actually a good thing. So I love that answer there.
Yeah,
But
I
let's go.
actually,
Go
yeah, go
ahead.
ahead.
Go. No, no, you go ahead. I was going to go off somewhere else.
Oh, okay. Well, just one, like, quick story about those nerves. I had just a couple years ago. My kids are older; they're both teenagers, and so they've grown up watching me in this space and performing. And I remember just about a year or so ago, my oldest came to me and she's like, "Dad, you still get nervous when you go on stage?" I'm like, "Every single time." She's like, "Nobody would ever know that." I said, "Well,
Hmm.
that's the point. We don't want them to know that we're nervous." I said, but that gives me the edge to make sure that I'm delivering the best performance I can every single time. And I tell her that
Hmm.
because it doesn't matter whether we're speaking to rooms of 5 or 50 or 5,000, it should be the same performance. at that same level. And I think that little bit of like nerves helps to drive that.
Yeah, yeah, you're exactly right. And you definitely don't want to show those nerves. I mean, if it comes out, just roll with it. It's okay. That's a part of it as you're getting into speaking for sure. So if you can do well enough not to show it, that's great. But if they do show, I mean, go with it. Maybe make a joke about it. Like, wow, I'm really nervous to be up here. Just
Always.
play it off. I mean, people are looking at you, and I always go to this quote or joke really from Jerry Seinfeld that more people would rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy. So people are seeing you there
Yeah.
on stage and they're like, I would never be able to do that. So if Jeremy's up there and his legs shaking, his palms are sweaty and everything,
Right.
he's doing way better than me. So they're gonna give you a little grace there, especially if you're, let's say, a not known speaker, maybe an Ed Milet, they would expect a higher caliber. They're not going to expect him to be nervous. So if he is a little nervous, like, what in the world's going on? It
Right.
might question that a little bit, but people still aren't going to necessarily judge you. It'll be a different kind of judgment, I guess, not the, oh my gosh, they're a terrible speaker
Right.
or
Right.
anything.
I think it's important to kind of just even play into that sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful part. Like a lot of the times that I'm speaking on stage, I'm speaking about music or emotions or mental health, or some of those kinds of pieces. So I
Mm-hmm.
use the music as part of it, which calms me.
Mm.
So I have built in things into my speaking moments or engagements to help me calm myself. And I just tell them it's for them, but it's for
Mm.
me. I'm like, oh, if
Yeah.
I just play this, I'll calm down enough so that the audience will also calm down with me. And so I build that into the format of when I'm speaking. So that way everybody else stays calm.
Interesting. So how'd you come up with that concept? Just something you decided to try, or because that's interesting that you did that. I know Ed Milet usually waits for him to be able to get in. I forget exactly how he says it, but basically get into the moment to get himself where he needs to be. Like he'll like snap his fingers or he'll do something to trigger himself to, okay, hey, we're here. So is that, I mean, how'd you come up with that concept?
Well, that's a really good question. And it brings us all the way back to kind of my backstory, which
Okay.
whether you were going there next or not,
That's where I was trying to go, but then this came up and I'm like, oh, I got to dig into this.
well, here it is. This is how I got there. This is how I really got to speaking on stage, even though it was decades later. When I was 16, I was in a kind of a pretty dark space, not a good space, whether it was personal, family life, some of those kinds of things. I always tell people, not the person I am today, which I'm thankful for. But in that moment, I was driving, I was 16, kind of going fast, like most 16-year-olds go, with kind of driving with the music up loud, kind of doing the
Mhm.
teenager thing. But what happened was that particular day, I decided I was going to try to take my life and go off the road
Mm.
and go into the river. Well, as my tires hit the gravel on the side of the road, my body made an instantaneous stop. So I slammed on the brakes and stopped in that moment. And whatever was playing on that radio, which I am still searching for today because I cannot remember the song. However, whatever was playing put me back on the road.
Hmm.
So it literally saved my life, which
Wow.
means it made a shift in my brain, which I'm like, okay, this is where I need to spend my time. I shifted from being like a sports guy and kind of into music. I dumped all sports. I was playing basketball and baseball and, track and doing some of those kinds of things. I cut all of that and I went all in on music.
Wow.
And then I started trying to use music to affect my brain, which 50% of the known parts of the brain when we listen to music are lit up, which is why we get lost in the moment when we're
Mhm.
listening to music because it literally cannot consume anything else.
Hmm.
So that's why we can use it for study and that's why we use it for speaking. That's, the list goes on. So I spent the next 5 years in still trying to move through a dark moment in my life using music to get me out of those moments or in those moments. And I started to play mind games. Another
Wow.
5 years later, my wife and I are on a family car trip. I have my two kids in the back. We're driving like 12 or 13 hours. We're just kind of driving. And if you've ever traveled with young ones, you know what that can be like. And so there just became an energy in the car. And in a moment, I reached over and just turned the radio to something different that
Mhm.
at the moment was intentional and it lowered the energy in the car. And my wife looked at me and she goes, "Why did you do that? You did that on purpose." I said, "Well, yes, I did that on purpose because I had read the emotional state and the energy of everybody in the car and said,
Mm.
this is what they need." And so I changed the station, and then the energy level came back down to here. And then as it happened again, I would switch it again. So it just became this kind of level of where do we keep this energy? And so that pushed me into like, I need to figure out this more. How can I do it for more people? I started to put it into my teaching because I was teaching students. Like,
Mhm.
okay, how can I help them better understand themselves? How can I help them better get through their day? And then my wife, who was a marriage and family therapist, she's like, you need to talk to mental health people about this.
Mm.
And I was like, well, why? She goes, well, people who have mental health issues or are dealing with those types of clients, they need to know this. And I said, okay. And so I started speaking at a MACMA conference, which is the Minnesota Association of Children's Mental Health, which is the biggest children's mental health organization in the US, is
Mm.
here in Minnesota. And so I started speaking at their event and just talking about music and how powerful it can be. And then it just really got me that was my introduction to the stage. I was scared to death. And after, even though I had been on the stage thousands of times, I had spent literally 20 years using this kind of idea of music affecting our space. And that really brought out my purpose of like, okay, I'm a teacher, I'm a musician, I care about people a lot, I care about connecting people. And so I was like, okay, now that my purpose is to bring this to others, how can they change? How can they have that passion for whatever it is? And so as I started speaking on those stages, people started hiring me like, hey, can you come speak to our staff about this? Hey, can you come speak to our clinic about this? And so that was kind of the how did I get here? How did I get
Mhm.
to talk about music? How did I get on that stage? Well, it's all started way back then, just having that. And music became then my platform.
Wow, man, that is a powerful story. I definitely was getting chills throughout there. I got to point out one thing, kind of lighten the mood here a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So you found a way basically to go on a 12-hour car ride and make it a lot better with children. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to try and use that now. We're not at the point where go on those rides yet, but that will come. It's about 18 hours for us to go back home to see family in Texas. And that's gonna be quite a haul. And we'll probably usually we split up in 2 days.
Yeah.
Sometimes we
Good
don't,
choice.
but yeah. So with children, it's definitely a 2-day trip. So I have to try and do that. Do it, maybe even do that to my wife sometimes. If she's a little hangry.
It does work. I have some insights on that. So yeah, it does work.
Nice. Well, we'll talk about that offline, so you
Perfect.
don't get in trouble with your wife about what you do to manipulate her energy.
She knows. Trust me.
Yeah.
We've been together 27 years.
Mm,
So she knows.
yeah. So I want to go dive a little bit deeper there. When you talk about getting on those stages the first time, you talk
Yeah.
about that fear that you had there, and still really kind of doing that. How was that first time? I mean, I think everybody's first time getting on stage is nerve-wracking, and maybe some of our audience hasn't been on stage yet, and they're scared to death because of that fear, and that fear is literally holding them back. So, how did that feel in that moment leading up to it, and then once you actually started speaking, and then what are some tips that you can give to the audience to just finally go after it and get on that stage?
Yeah. So for me, I was scared to death, which was confusing to my brain to begin with because I'm like, Jeremy, you've been on hundreds of stages, lots of times. But it was something new, and
Mm,
always something new feels uncomfortable. And so I was scared. I had the whole, like, my legs were shaking. I was like in a suit. So like I was sweating. I'm like, oh, that's gross. And like, I'm going to like, what am I going to say? How is this going to come up? I'm like, you have a PowerPoint. You know what all of these things are. And so I was just like, I had to find ways to give myself. So like you talk about an ed my let using like a snap or a click or, you know, something of that. Like, how do I get my brain? Because that's really what's happening, right? It's our brain like going into overactive mode. And so I started. So what I did is like, okay, well, what calms me? I'm like, well, you know, I always start all my talks. I ramp up the audience and myself. So I played a song that makes me relax. So I always use Freddie Freeloader by Miles Davis. It's also 9 minutes long. So if you start it like 5 minutes before the talk in the room, it helps me to calm down. So I started with that. It didn't work the first time, of course,
Yeah, of
because
course.
not only did I not know how many people were going to show up, because this is like a big, huge conference. It's a 3-day conference, and there's multiple sessions going on at kind of every, let's call it 75-minute slot. And I was like the slot right after lunch. So like, how many people are going to come after lunch? How many people are going to take a nap while I'm because they just ate lunch? And my room was full. I had over like 100 people in that room. And I was like, like 10 people will probably come. And I had one of the biggest sessions.
Wow.
Because it was something different. And people were like, we want something different. And as the room filled up, my nerves and my blood pressure were going up, and you start get more shaky and kind of the sweaty palm. But it was really just starting. I had to start. And so after you kind of get through the first like minute or so of like, this is uncomfortable, I'm probably going to say something wrong, it probably is going to go goofy. It should go goofy. It's your first time. I used to tell my drumline and marching band students when I was teaching long ago, is like, you have to suck to be good. So let's go suck for a while so that we can be good. So let's go not be great at this for a minute so that we can be good. So that was the mindset I had. I'm like, well, the worst that's going to happen is it's going to suck for a little while and people might not like it, but it'll get better because they'll get to listen to music. Great. So the first few minutes, of course, went not great because I was just uncomfortable, and it's weird, and it's a big space, and you've got these lines of tables, just 100 people just staring at just you.
Yeah.
It's intimidating, and it really is. But I was like, once I started talking, 75 minutes was over. And I'm like, my wife was sitting in the front row, like, you got 5 minutes left. I'm like, wait a minute, I got 9 slides left. How am I going to get through these all? And so, but it was because I just relaxed and took a breath and allowed the room to feed me and allowed my passion for what I was talking about. So if you're passionate about that content or whatever you're speaking about, let that take over and let that be the thing, because nobody's going to tell that thing like you tell it. And so for me, like, if there's a tip, have that passion for whatever you're speaking about. And then once that takes over and then the audience sees that, they're going to want more. And the reason I ran out of slides or didn't get to the end of the slides is because people wanted to ask questions. They wanted to be part of the conversation. They wanted to know more. And so that was a format that I could do that. Not every speaking engagement has that format where you have that question and answer.
Yeah.
But I feel like once you start and then when you're done, like, all of that floods out, right? You can relax. You're like, what just happened? So show up. Just be confident about who you are and what you are passionate about. And then just deliver that in your way. And just know that the first time, it might not be good. It might be terrible.
Yeah, man, so many great points. Definitely speaking to your passion helps so much when it comes to speaking on stage. That's what you should be speaking about, or something that you know very well. Because if you're just speaking about something random, it's never going to go well. And especially if you're not speaking about something you're passionate about either, it's not going to bleed into what you talk about. And if I could talk about fishing and tell you some stuff about fishing, but I don't know. I'm not a fisher. I'm not a fisherman. I'm not a fisher. I'm not passionate about fishing. So yeah, okay, yeah. Here's how you bait a hook. You got hooks, you got the reel, the rod. You go throw it out there into the water. Well, not the whole rod, obviously, but
Right.
you cast it and try and catch a fish. Cool. Yeah, how am I going to talk about that for 75 minutes? And that's a very long time to speak. And most
Yes.
speeches are anywhere from 30 to 60 usually, but you had a different setting there, being able to have those questions asked, which helps a ton. PowerPoints help a ton, especially at the beginning when you're getting into speaking. So it's a great way to help keep that structure without having every single thing memorized to speak about.
Right. Right. I agree. I think that's essential. And like you said, in that case, like that was required. Like those people needed that information because there
Yeah.
were more technical things going on. But yeah, 75 minutes is a long time. And this spring I did 2 hours.
Oh man.
And I think we actually talked about that after it. I'm like you need to give them a break. Like, so thinking about some things like that. Well, a 2 hour talk, like you need to give them a break. Like they got to stand up. Like maybe
Mm-hmm.
some people need to go use the restroom. That's, you know, again, like right after breakfast or right after a lunch, kind
Yeah.
of those are things to keep in mind as a speaker. And I would
Mm-hmm.
imagine that if you're at an event, an organizer might kind of help to prompt some of those things as well.
Yeah, yeah. Especially if you're going to speak for 2 hours, you got to get them up, get them engaged, doing something like, hey, let's take a 5 minute break here real quick. Meet your neighbor. Talk about one of the points we just talked about here in the first hour or 30 minutes about
Right.
how you're going to go back and implement that, and then helps reinforce something that you talked about and everything. But I also want to bring up the point about you being okay with failing. So many people, and I feel like social media makes this even worse, that you just see everybody so successful and things just seem to go everybody's way. And that's not the case. You and I have mentors that they created stages or they've created coaching programs that flopped and they did not go well at first. And now we see them as this super successful person, but it's because they worked through the failures. They were willing to fail. So if you're not
Right.
willing to fail, you're not going to find that success. You're not going to be invited back on stage.
Right.
So
And,
make sure that you're willing to fail. I like that you brought up that point as well.
well, and I think that if you want to call it a failure or
Yeah.
learning opportunity, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a way better way to put it versus
You know,
failure. Yeah.
we found one way to not do it, and let's not do it that way again,
Hmm.
and then learn from that.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like there's somebody I've seen that kind of like jokingly says like stack those L's, stack those learning opportunities, not the losses, but learning
Right.
opportunities.
Right.
Yeah, definitely want to make sure you're
We've
emphasizing that it's a learning opportunity, not a loss, because then you got to obviously stack the W's, the wins.
right.
But yeah, it's a win. It really, it's a learning opportunity is a win. It's not a failure by any means, as long as you continue to go. But I do want to talk about our event that we got coming up in a few months, the Biltmore event. So we're going to have a lot of awesome speakers speaking to business executives about how to work on the business versus in the business. And I want to get your perspective on that because this is a pretty big event. It's or not a big event, but it's big to us, if you will, just because of the complexity of getting it all together. But it's a smaller, intimate event with about 40 people. But I'd like to get your perspective on why you wanted to do this event, and not necessarily with me, but just the event in general, and how you're feeling kind of going into all this, setting it up. Because a lot of people are looking at creating their own events as well, and it can be a scary thing. So, what are your thoughts behind it?
Well, I'll start with what you ended with, which is yes, it's a scary thing. And I think it's a scary thing because we, those of us who have attended many events or been part of things, we know what it takes to put on a successful event. And we want that feeling for the people who are attending it. And so I think the biggest thing for me is I want to provide an opportunity for people who don't always get an opportunity to work on them and work on their business in a small setting, just because I know the value of like getting 40 people in a space, like that's tangible and reachable. And over the course of this event, which is, a 3-day event versus like a 1-day business conference,
Mm-hmm.
you really have that time to connect and give that opportunity for businesses to connect and business opportunities to grow out of that, but also just an opportunity for people to sit in that space for and with themselves. And so, and with the speakers that we have as part of this event, I think that they exemplify that in what they're already doing in their businesses. And so I think
Hmm.
we're a really good natural fit to be part of the event, but then also being able to be and live in that space with them for that 3 days and see what that feels like as a business executive.
Mm. Yeah, I like that. And that's exactly where I was going with that. I want to break this down a little bit just to help people understand how to pick the speaker. So let's start with there, but we'll really just go through about why we picked speakers, why we picked the venue, and everything. So maybe we go a little bit broader. We'll go, why did we pick this venue? What was the reason behind that? Like, why would we pick a venue like the Biltmore?
I think the the simplest reason is I like to call it the wow factor.
Hmm.
Like that's not someplace you would typically choose to go. And it has so many things around it. And I think there's an energy and a synergy just in the venue. Um, as we've even been talking about it more and exploring all the other things that we're having as part of the event, it's like there's so many opportunities for just the venue. Like you wouldn't necessarily always choose to vacation there. So
Hmm.
like it it puts you in a different mindset to begin with, which is kind of part of the whole changing our wavelength of
Hmm.
what our mindset is. And so just removing us from our daily business life and putting it into a space that is of that caliber and at that level by people who built it for that intention. The Vanderbilts built it for this high level, big, yet intimate space. And so like it kind of just enveloped the idea that we created for the event to begin with.
Yeah, yeah. And for those of you that don't know, and I don't know all the history, but this was a chateau for them, just a little house to get away to get some fresh air in the Smoky Mountains of
Right.
North Carolina. And this is the largest estate that was ever privately owned in the United States, at least. It may be in the world, but I know for the United States at least. So it's just an amazing place there. But actually, I'm glad you brought up the name of the mastermind. How did we come about that? Is obviously naming helps, but it's not necessary for you to create an event, if you will. You can just say,
Correct.
hey, we're doing this conference, I guess. I mean, but obviously you want to kind of have some kind of name to it. But what's the meaning behind that name?
Well, the meaning, especially the wavelength part, wavelength sessions, let's just be very wide open about it. It's the perfect combination of you and me.
Hmm.
So why I chose kind of the wavelength idea is we want to become in tune with our life and our business. And in the world of music, a wave is how we tune things. And it happens to be like um, a just out of normal tuning is 442, which is a 442. And I don't want to
Mm.
get super music theory on you, but uh, it puts you like a level of above and at a resonance level that puts you in tune. So I wanted this wavelength idea with sessions for people to come in and become in tune with themselves, their business, and the people that are there. And so it was kind of like the perfect culmination at this small chateau in the middle of the Smoky Mountains. It was like an alignment. It was an in tune moment, to be very cliche about it, in terms of music, in terms of speaking for, with what you have going on.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, we were just clicking. I mean, we were just super aligned as we were just talking about things, talking about events, talking about business and everything. And that's another reason why we decided to really come up with that name as well. I just loved it that we just really had that synergy and that synchronicity,
Yes.
literally on that same wavelength. And so we wanted to create a session or sessions for people to be able to come to be able to get on that same wavelength and help them get to that next level for their business. So why did we go about and how did we go about picking the speakers and really who they were? And I'm trying to lead you here a little bit, but I'll give my 2 cents as well to kind of give clarity on what I'm thinking as well with this, but why did we pick the speakers that we did?
That's maybe I'll answer my part and you can answer your part.
Yeah.
Because maybe there's not a collective we, but we arrived at it at the same space.
Yeah.
I think part of the criteria that I was thinking of in my mind as we were kind of coming up with people is we didn't want people that were necessarily the speakers that everyone has. We wanted something also that people were going to be able to see, like have different views, like they're coming from different industries, yet all with kind of the same mindset, the same processes, and yet different journeys to get to kind of where they are in their businesses. And who is going to bring the most amount of value to the people who were there because of that collective? So whether they are, entrepreneurs and coaches, whether in real estate, whether they're in the commercial space, whether they're in, fitness or kind of serial entrepreneur spaces, kind of that encompasses, all of those speakers. How do we, bring the most amount of value to the people who are going to be there? And sometimes if you have too many of the same types of people, you're hearing the same message. And so having picked 5 other speakers besides ourselves to be part of the event brings an opportunity for them to hear all of those different opportunities. And they come from all over the US. So it's geographically, they're coming from different spaces. From a business standpoint, they're coming from different, but the messages that they're bringing are all equally as powerful.
Yeah, definitely a lot of diversity within geographically. And then also there are men and women. It's not just one sex. Usually a lot of events you see, it's very dominated by men. And I don't know why we're not going to get into that, but we want to make sure we also had some, we had some women there as well. And they're all powerhouses, every single one of the people here. Yes. And a big thing for me is that they're doing the work and they're relatable. They may be very successful in their own right and where they're at. Obviously, there's people that are more successful than them, but they still have had quite a bit of success. But they're still relatable and down to earth, and you can have a chat with them, which is really goes into the next part of why we created this event and what makes it unique. But it's that you can sit down with them and ask them questions about business, and they're going to give you the answer, not just kind of, oh yeah, give this a try. And it's just a very generic answer. If they're going to give you details and really try and help you out and coach you through that. Now, obviously, if you keep asking question after question after question, that's a little different, but they navigate that as well, which is a big part of going from working in the business to working on the business. They give you enough information that you can go back and take and implement yourself, but not so much that you're overwhelmed and now they basically got to step in and help you, or so little that basically they have to come save you every time, because it's a struggle. I mean, that's a struggle for business owners, is figuring out where that fine line is. And I feel that these people have really done a great job at doing that. But then also with that, the uniqueness that I love about our event and the plans is it's not just going to be people coming up and speaking to you and teaching you stuff. You're going to be able to hang out with the speakers. We're going to be doing activities together to help us build this camaraderie and these relationships in the network. And these speakers, we picked them because we knew they would be willing to be there for the whole event. There's speakers out there that they'll come in, they'll speak, they'll leave. They won't even stay for other speeches. They won't hardly have a conversation with people. And so, at least for me, and I'm sure Jeremy's on the same page, we wanted people that would come in and have that real conversation, because those, if you will, fireside chat, which we're going to have one, is
an actual fire.
Yeah, actual fire. I mean, that's going to be awesome. But you can have those chats with those people, just having a regular conversation, even though they have the success and maybe you're not quite there where you're working on the business as a business owner, you're still in the business, maybe you're a solopreneur. You can have these conversations with these people. And that's why we picked these people. And that's what makes this event unique, is that you get an experience unlike any other conference that you've been to.
Right.
And everybody gets it as well. It's not, hey, go ahead and get this VIP upgrade and you get this extra little bit of access. And then, oh, you want the ultra platinum upgrade, diamond
Right.
elite, whatever, and you get this extra bit. No, everybody that comes gets the same experience because we want it to be all inclusive. We don't want it to be exclusive. So
Right.
what are your thoughts? What makes our event unique besides obviously us being amazing speakers?
Of course. I mean, I think that you hit all of the points, and honestly, I think that in some of the feedback that we've already gotten from the speakers, like they are looking forward to the event for the same reasons that attendees should be, because they too have that opportunity to learn. They too have that opportunity to connect, and bringing in the diverse backgrounds and kind of where they are at. And I love that you said that they are doing it, like
Mm-hmm.
they're in the trenches. They are also doing it just like you and I, just like people who are listening and the people who would be attendees. We want them to feel like, yeah, they're kind of coming alongside and not kind of this divide. I think sometimes when you go to a conference, like you feel like it's not just a physical divide from the stage to the audience. Like
Mm-hmm.
it feels like something bigger than that. And what we're really trying to do is break that and make it so inclusive that everybody's just kind of a part of it. It just happens to be that seven of us at some point in time during that 3 days is going to speak in front of those people and share stories and share opportunities and talk about those kinds of things. And so I think that's the biggest reason it's so different and unique is that it gives that inclusivity. And like you said, it's like everybody's on the same level.
Mm. Exactly. And so this is how we went about building this stage, building this event, was going through and finding a venue that's going to be unlike any venue that people have been to before. We want to create that wow factor. You want to have people be excited to be coming to your event. If you just decided to do it at a hotel, okay, it's a hotel, and I understand hotels are nice. There's conveniences behind that, but we wanted to create something unique there, and then have the speakers in place that we're going to give the most value, as much value as possible, and not have the same speakers that go to every single event. While there's nothing wrong with that, those are amazing speakers, and that's why they're obviously going and speaking at every single event. We want to make sure we got a different perspective because each person is unique in what they speak about, even if they speak on the same thing. So we wanted to bring people in that you hadn't heard from before because we can hear something. Like Jeremy can tell me something 20 times and keep telling me and telling me. And all of a sudden I hear it from somebody else, let's say my wife, and all of a sudden it just clicks like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. But Jeremy's like, I've told you that same thing 20 times. Why is it now clicking? But it's that different perspective. So we want to bring that in as well. And then also have activities to go along with the event because too many events, it's all about just speakers. It's an overload of information. So we want you to be able to understand and make those connections with people so that you can actually really learn that and be able to have that opportunity to speak with the speakers afterwards because sometimes you need a little bit more detail on what they talked about and they're speaking to an audience. So you can't go into ultra detail on one exact thing. And so maybe they did skip over some details and they can give that information. So that's really just to sum it up how we created this event and we went about creating that event. So if you're looking at creating an event, think about those things like that. And this is a smaller event. For your bigger event, it's gonna be a little bit different. But for your smaller events, this is the way we went about it. Any other things to add to that?
Well, I just thought of one thing while you were kind of talking about that, kind of bringing it all together,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of that like this is an audience and speaker. This is like we're all together. It's just I used to tell my students something. I'm like, the group that plays together. And what I mean, like, is the people who do life or do business together can really go do business together. And so,
Mm.
like, I think having those activities, like a bonfire that's specific for our group, and some other really cool opportunities that I don't know that we want to release it all right away, but it gives us an opportunity to like do life together, so that doing business together is easier, or those opportunities even come alive.
Yeah, yeah, you're exactly right about that. And I like so simple. Those that play together play together. It's like what? Like, but you're
You
right.
do.
If you're playing together, you're going to be together and then play together and really be on that same wavelength. To put that pun in there.
There you go.
But that's exactly why we created this event. That's how we went about creating the event as well. We had to think through it. Too many people think about throwing a stage together. They want to create an event and they just go create it. And then they just put people together and they don't really think about it strategically. So you have to have that end goal in mind. What is the end goal? Who are you trying to serve? What are you trying to have as takeaways from this event? And then we reverse engineered everything from that and put the right people in place and
Right.
found the right venue and everything. So if you're trying to create an event, that's kind of the formula for you. No, we didn't spell it straight out for you, but we tried to give you some details on what we did with our event so you could learn how to create your own event.
Absolutely.
Jeremy, I have one final question for you. If you could only share one message for the rest of your life, what would that message be?
I think the simplest message and the most simple yet most powerful is show up and never give up, but keep
Mm,
showing up.
mm,
So whether you're winning, whether you're losing, whether you're learning, whether you're investing, just keep showing up. And some days you're just showing up for yourself, and most days show up for everyone else.
mm. I'm gonna ask a follow-up question to that. So, how are you showing up right
I
now?
wake up. I'll wake up every morning and read, drink coffee,
Of
and just
course, you got to drink
be,
coffee.
be there for be there for someone every day.
Mm. I know there's a lot of days that you're there for me, man. I sit there and shoot you a text. Here lately it's been like good things like wins, like, oh my gosh, this happened. You're like, dude,
Right.
that's exciting. It's so awesome. Like, so happy for you and everything. So and I love that. I'm gonna start implementing that, be more intentional with implementing that. I feel like I do that fairly well with people, like trying to have those conversations and cheer them on and everything. But I'm gonna be a little bit more intentional and try and make sure I'm cheering or being there for somebody every single day.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head with that. Like there's showing up, and we can just show up and be a body, but show up and be
Mm,
intentional. Whatever
mm,
that needs to be for you for the day or for that other person or for your business or an organization, just show up. And then when you get to that stage, you'll be ready to show up.
mm. Yes. Be Sebastian Rusk gave me a quote, and I butchered it when I was on the podcast with him. Basically, instead of fake it till you make it, it's like be it until you become it, something like that.
Yes, that's
Yeah, so
fantastic.
be all about it. Be not faking the part, but actually being that person until finally you are recognized that the person is. So if you want to be a public speaker, start trying to be a public speaker. Start being that now. Speaking on videos, whatever it is, to be able to speak in front of people until finally you get the opportunity to speak in front of people. So be it until you become it.
I love that.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, I kind of butchered it. I have to try and put it in the show notes, the actual quote there, because it was an awesome quote from Sebastian. But Jeremy, appreciate you coming on, sharing all this value, sharing your story and everything. And if people want to connect with you and follow what you're doing, where can they best connect with you at?
Well, Facebook is a great place to connect. You can grab my book at roadto99.com, which would be fantastic. Or 3kingsmedia.com is the next place. And three, the EE is 2 3s. So something
Hmm,
a little bit more unique for you.
there we go.
Otherwise, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, those kinds of places. And please make sure to reach out. And if you got questions, I'm always here.
I love it. I love it. Well, Jeremy, again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It was a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you. It was a blast.